He was released with one of the most ominous names in the entire Kenner line, the Death Squad Commander. It sounded like he'd be running the show, but truth be told, he commanded very little. Hi, I'm Alex. Welcome back to Star Wars Relics. Today we're taking a closer look at Kenner's Death Squad Commander, whose name was later toned down to Star Destroyer Commander. Apparently it was fine for children's toys in the late 70s, but a little too dark for the 80s. We first see the Death Squad Commander providing security in Tarkin's boardroom. Their presence in such a high-level meeting suggests they hold a very high security clearance. Next, two can be seen escorting Darth Vader as he begins his interrogation of Princess Leia. When Tarkin devises his plan to blackmail Leia, a Death Squad Commander can be spotted working in the background of the control room. When it comes time to deliver the ultimatum, Leia is escorted into the room by Vader and two Death Squad commanders. They remain in the background throughout the entire exchange. During the destruction of Alderaan, a Death Squad commander is seen assisting in the firing sequence, and two more are standing dangerously close to the Death Star's main blast. When Tarkin learns that Dantooine was deserted, two Death Squad commanders stand guard in the room. We don't see any Death Squad commanders again until the heroes reach detention block AA-23, where two are stationed on guard. When the rescue begins, Chewie hurls one aside and the other is cut down in the chaos that follows. Later, during the Battle of Yavin, they can be glimpsed scrambling in the Death Star's hallways. Technically, in The Empire Strikes Back, we don't see the Death Squad commander again, but we do meet the Imperial Navy Trooper, and for my purposes, that's close enough. And since the Imperial Navy Troopers never got a figure, this is my only chance to include them. Once again, we see them providing security, this time on the bridge of the Executor. One is clearly visible in the background during Vader's meeting with Admiral Ozzel, Captain Piet, and General Veers. We also spot one standing guard outside Vader's meditation chamber when Piet nervously reports. Later, when Admiral Piet informs Vader that the Emperor demands an update, one trooper can be seen in the background. When Vader briefs the bounty hunters, Navy troopers can be seen standing nearby. After Captain Nita is done delivering his apology, two Navy troopers are tasked with removing his body. Finally, when Vader leaves the bridge after the Millennium Falcon escapes, these are the last two Imperial Navy troopers we see in The Empire Strikes Back. The Death Star trooper makes his return early in Return of the Jedi, when Vader arrives at the second Death Star. They handle communications and clearance codes. More can be seen when the shuttle lands, and during the Emperor's arrival, we spot rows of them, though it's hard to tell if some of them are Imperial Navy troopers. They appear to stand toward the back ranks during the ceremony. On Endor, we see several manning the controls in the shield generator bunker when our heroes gain access. Once the trap is sprung, more are visible outside. When the Ewoks attack, they scatter, some retreating into the bunker, others fleeing into the woods. A group is still at the controls when Han pulls his trick to open the blast doors, and the three squads sent to respond are the last time we see them on the forest moon. Finally, back on the Death Star itself, these troopers appear in its final moments, marking the last time they're seen on screen in the original trilogy. I think neither name, Death Squad Commander or Star Destroyer Commander, really fits this character. But that was kind of a trend with Lucasfilm and Kenner back then. It feels like they ran out of time to properly name characters and left placeholders in place. Ultimately, the role of this figure is closer to military police on the Death Star, providing security at VIP meetings, escorting VIPs, prisoner escorts and transfers, and providing security at detention facilities. I would have gone with something along the lines of Death Star Security Trooper, which feels a lot closer to what this guy actually does. The Death Squad Commander first appeared on the original Star Wars 12-back. Amazingly, that same image carried through all the way to Return of the Jedi. It appears he never received a Tri-Logo or a Power of the Force card. I'm going to assume this was the only photo Kenner had to work with, because almost anything else would have been better. I don't really mind that it's essentially a headshot, but I hate how dark it is. He blends into the background, the lights behind him are dull, and worst of all, it looks like his eyes are closed. There were so many better shots they could have used. I would have gone with this one from the detention block, or a posed one from him standing guard in Tarkin's boardroom. Originally released as the Death Squad Commander on the Star Wars 12-backs, the figure was renamed Star Destroyer Commander starting with the Empire Strikes Back 31-back. However, there are rare transitional Empire Strikes Back 21-backs, where the card carries the Empire logo but still uses the Death Squad commander name. These are very rare and highly sought after by collectors. The basic shape is there, thanks to the helmet, and that helmet really simplified the job of creating a human head for Kenner. The sculpt itself is pretty minimal. The helmet is smaller and more streamlined than what we see on screen, and the only real detail is those 3 circles, which don't seem to have a direct counterpart in the movie. On screen, the helmet has more of a rounded dome that flares outward at the sides, while the figure's version is more of an even round cap. That said, the face underneath is actually quite good, with a solid human likeness considering the scale, and they nailed the helmet color. One drawback though is that because the helmet was painted, it's often the first area to show wear, and with the light plastic underneath, the scuffs are glaringly obvious. So while it's not the most accurate helmet sculpt, it clearly gets the job done. When it comes to costume accuracy, it feels like Kenner pulled from multiple sources, because the figure isn't really that close to what we see on screen. The most obvious difference is the uniform color. The figure is gray, while the film, it's always black. That said, it makes sense that Kenner would introduce another color. With Vader and the upcoming TIE pilot already in all black, a gray uniform added variety. Honestly, I'm glad they did, because I really love the look of this figure. The most accurate elements are the gloves, boots, and belt, though the belt is missing the holster for the sidearm. One curious detail is the inclusion of an officer-style rank bars, which actually supports the commander title Kenner gave him. It also adds weight to the idea that the figure is really a mashup of the Death Star trooper and an Imperial officer. Though understandable, it's still a bit of a miss. Kenner armed him with the only Imperial blaster sculpt they had at the time, the Stormtrooper's E11. In that sense, it was a logical choice, and to be fair, it actually suits the Death Squad commander really well. The E11 has that instantly recognizable Imperial look. That said, on screen, he only ever is seen with the DH-17 blaster pistol, which makes perfect sense for a trooper stationed indoors. The smaller sidearm is practical for their role, while the E11 was the standard weapon for frontline stormtroopers. Still, I don't really mind the switch. The E11 may not be accurate, but it looks fantastic in the figure's hands and adds to its overall display appeal. Almost perfect. The arm sculpt looks natural in either position, raised or lowered, and the hand was clearly designed with a blaster in mind. It grips the weapon securely and looks great doing it. The only drawback is that the blaster doesn't quite line up with the head, so the figure never gives the impression of aiming directly down the barrel. For an original 20-figure release, he has a surprisingly dynamic stance, with his feet shoulder-width apart. With a little patience, he can be posed in just about any position. He stands best with his arms at his sides, but he can also stand with both arms raised, though at that point, he's close to tipping over. His dynamic stance helps avoid the stiffness and narrowness typical of many of the other figures in the original 20. At Fresh Solutions Therapy, we sometimes see what we call surprise couples therapy, when one partner books a session without telling the other until the day of the appointment. We get it. It's not easy to reach out for help in your relationship, and we really respect the partners who take that first step, but we don't recommend booking couples therapy without getting your partner on board first. If you're not sure your partner's ready, try starting with an individual session for yourself. It's a great way to get support for you and your relationship, even if your partner is not ready yet. If that sounds good, please visit freshsolutionsTherapy.ca and book a free 15-minute consultation with one of our amazing couples therapists to get started. This is one of those figures where the pieces really come together and just work. The Death Squad commander is easily one of the most natural looking human figures in the original 20, avoiding the stiff, narrow poses that plagued so many of his wave mates. Screen accuracy though is another story. The gloves are spot on, and for what's basically an indoor posting, they seem more like a nuisance than necessity. I wouldn't want to wear them all day. The belt looks sharp and mostly accurate, but it's missing the holster for the absent DH-17 blaster pistol. Since Kenner skipped the DH-17 altogether, they probably made the right call equipping him with the Stormtrooper's blaster instead. And to his credit, he has an excellent grip. The grey uniform may not match what we see on screen, but I think it's a great choice. It looks fantastic, and probably better than if he had been molded in solid black. The officer rank bar is another added detail that isn't accurate, but it doesn't take anything away from the figure. Overall, it's an excellent looking but highly inaccurate figure. Yet, thanks to the distinctive helmet, it's still instantly recognizable. In my Star Wars universe, he filled the role of junior officer, sort of a middle layer between the Stormtroopers and Vader. For lack of a better comparison, he was my version of Captain Phasma long before she ever existed. My first Death Squad commander had an unfortunate encounter with my grandmother's mini dachshund. He lost his left leg in the encounter. I still hold a grudge, even though Daffy was an otherwise really good boy. Luckily, I did get another one. Even though very little about this figure is screen accurate, I always loved the way he looked. I didn't care that he was wildly off, he just looked cool. I loved the grey uniform, and honestly, every inaccuracy Kenner leaned into made the figure better in my eyes. Thanks again to everyone who subscribed and taken the time to comment. I really appreciate it. The feedback has been fantastic, and a lot of you have a great sense of humor, which makes reading the comments even more fun. If you liked what you saw, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you didn't like it, leave a comment and let me know how I can improve. I genuinely want to hear from you. For now. Don't forget to check out the Star Wars Relics Facebook page, where I post a 24-hour heads up on what's coming up next. And if you know your Star Wars, you already know who's next. Until then, take care.